All right, you welcome back. It's to the breakfast on Plus TV Africa. We're set for our first conversation. Muktar Mohammed, financial analyst, joining us via Zoom live in Lagos, has been on standby. Muktar, it's great to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Good morning.
Welcome. Well, there's no hiding place for you. There is no hiding place for you. Muktar, I'm not talking about you, but that seems to be the message to the Central Bank of Nigeria regarding the withdrawal of the old Naira notes from circulation in the country, as the Supreme Court on Friday gave judgment declaring that policy illegal, and some are saying there is no hiding place now for the Central Bank of Nigeria. Stakeholders and financial analysts are quoted as saying that despite the provisions of the CBN Act that give the CBN authority on monetary issues, financial authority on monetary issues in the country, the central bank must obey the order of the highest court in the land. And as we all know, the Supreme Court on Friday ruled that the 1,000 Naira, 500 Naira, and 200 Naira notes shall continue to be used side by side. Shall, continue is the word they use, with the newly redesigned notes till the 31st of December 2023. The court also held that the 3-month deadline or timeline by the central bank was not enough. It was not in tune, with the act setting up the bank, and as such, it is unconstitutional. Now, Muktar Mohammed, do you agree with those who say now, as at now, in this case, there is no hiding place for the Central Bank of Nigeria? Good morning, and thank you once again for your time.
You like that? No hiding place for the Central Bank of Nigeria, but the Central Bank of Nigeria will always find a hiding place for themselves, and that's what they are doing. What we're saying, we've not heard from the presidency, we've not heard from the central bank since this judgment was given. And from feel I got yesterday is that the banks are actually paying the old notes. Some banks are actually dispersing the old notes over 1,000 Naira, 500 Naira. But the unfortunate thing is that some of the customers are not even ready to collect the old notes again. So, because again, there's another issue. If you collect the old notes and you are to return the old note to CBN, to the bank, you need to fill something from the CBN portal they have created that you have to return the old note. So you have to go to that portal and fill it before you take that receipt and take it to the bank before the bank will collect it. So definitely, I think the CBN has found a hiding place for themselves by coming up with guidelines, which for me is still same of same. What I keep asking is that they withdrawn 1,000 Naira notes, the old notes, or the old 1,500 Naira note. Will the CBN still be printing those old notes via the new notes? And also, since the Supreme Court said we should have this till December. So I think there's a lot of challenges that will be involved in that technically, because the CBN made all of us to believe that the old notes, they've already taken it out of the banking space. And again, if you begin to bring those old notes into the system, then you are creating a monster called inflation, could go higher than what we are experiencing now. Because what they are doing now is to map out strategies on how to control inflation using the new note in circulation to reduce circulation of currency, to reduce the number of currency in circulation, and make sure that we do a lot of this transaction digitally. So definitely, I think there's a big challenge. It could not just be giving the order, it's the implementation of those orders that could be a challenge for the CBN.
Well, but I'd like to ask you, which should, take the front or the center stage? Should it be the ruling of the Supreme Court or, the previous order or another order, or statement from the government or the Central Bank of Nigeria?
Supreme. When they say you are supreme, you are supreme. So you give judgment. Somebody said the Supreme Court is like God God in a country. He's supreme. So his judgment is supreme. Nobody can challenge his judgment, just like we cannot challenge God's judgment. So we cannot challenge the Supreme Court judgment. It's going back to tell the Supreme Court to challenge themselves. So definitely for me, the Supreme Court takes orders, we should be going with the Supreme Court. But again, you must know that the Supreme Court actually, in all of those judgments, the Central Bank of Nigeria was not party to that. It was between the state government and the federal government. And in the federal government, in turn, which the central bank is a parastatal under the federal government. we could say, okay, now the central bank is independent of the federal government. But again, the current CBN governor have not even made us to see that the central bank is independent of the federal government, because every time he say, I met Mr. President gave me approval, I met me. So definitely that means the independency of the CBN seems no longer to be there. So I think with that, it should obey the Supreme Court order. If that's what I feel. And I feel, like I said, is the other way is for the CBN to challenge the Supreme Court again and tell the Supreme Court that we're not party to that.
Yeah, so but just before Kofi comes in, I'm trying to understand, if the Supreme Court is really supreme and should be supreme, then why then are we having difficulties in compliance? So you see commercial banks, up until this moment, I mean, you can't even find any note, not the new or the old Naira note, including, you know, what the president had stated prior to this time as to having the 200 Naira note really chunked into the economy. That's not the case. So why is there no compliance with the ruling of the Supreme Court?
Like I said, you need to know the technicality behind this when it comes to monetary policy. Once you give a monetary policy decision, once you reverse that decision, sometimes it takes a lot of technicality to get it back on stream. I'm not just waiting for the CBN on that. What I'm saying in essence is this: if you've given an order that this is what you want, and then you said, okay, we should bring back the 200 Naira notes. Are the 200 Naira notes in the vaults of the bank any longer? That is one thing we must ask. Do the bank still have it? Then, if the bank doesn't have it, they've taken it to CBN. Does CBN also have not, there's a way they say once those money comes in circulation, they have printed the new 200 Naira notes into the system. So how much of the new 200 Naira note do you have? And how much of the old 200 Naira note do you have? How are you going to use this in terms of because the whole idea is that this is supposed to be a monetary policy tool. So how are you going to combine? How many of the old 200 Naira note do you want to have by the old new 200 Naira note? How is this going to help your drive in controlling inflation? How is this going to help in you knowing currency in circulation? We mustn't forget that one of the reasons the CBN gave us was that we cannot even the number of currency that they printed that is in the banking space is small comparable to those that are outside the banking space. And when they came with this policy, they were able to recover 1.7 trillion that was outside the banking space that will now find their way into the banking space. And they were still looking for about 500 billion that was left to find itself back into the banking space. So when you look at that, there's a lot of technicality in it. Now you came with the new judgment again, the 500, the old 500 and the new 500, the old 1,000 and the new 1,000 should go hand in hand now. How much of the new 1,500 do we still have? Do you still have it in your votes? Has it been accounted for? Is it going to be part of what you want for means of medium of exchange? And how do you, there's a lot of technicality in it. And I think that's why the CBN is just keeping on and saying, okay, you know what? Because what the CBN believe now is that outside those notes that are with the banks, maybe the old note that the bank has not returned or is still with the bank treasury, outside those old notes, any other old notes that have not been returned before now are notes that could be as a result of crime or elitist fund. So that's why they are now creating a portal that says if the bank is to collect any old note, before you collect that note, you have to go to that portal, fill those forms, give up all your details. Then with that, before the bank will accept those notes from you. But for the bank to pay you the old notes, it must also be the notes that have not been redeemed back to CBN. Now, when those notes are not redeemed back to CDM, and you now give me that old note, that's why some customers are rejecting it. And now at a point, I want to bring back that old notes to your banking space. I will have to go through the portal again to CBN to fill it and say, this note was given to me by the bank. It makes it cumbersome. So definitely, I think there's a lot of technicality. They are using, look, you've given a judgment, we obey your judgment, but the guideline to us obeying your judgment, you didn't give us guideline on how to obey your judgment.
That's interesting. The judgment giving us guideline, not giving us, is what I think may be the answer to our next question, Nick. Mukhtar. The central bank, the Supreme Court has given its judgment. The order is for the old Naira notes to be legal tender and to be side by side the new notes till 31st December. But I mean, are we going to see the central bank releasing new Naira notes? Or are we going to see the banks who have the new Naira notes in their vaults giving that out? Because the central bank is able to determine the amount of hard currency in circulation. I don't think the court talked about that. And the issue we're facing now is the number of money in circulation. We don't have enough to go around. We can't see it. So what is going to change about this?
I think you've asked the question and somehow you've answered it, because we're looking at the hard currency in circulation by and by what is printed out. Now, the CBN will tell you they will not print any old Naira notes again. They will not print old Naira notes. They will still be printing the new Naira notes. And remember, I keep saying that the CBN did not say, if you return 10,000 Naira, we are going to give you back 10,000 Naira. They say part of the reason why they were coming with this policy was that a lot of currencies are no more in circulation. I mean, they are not in the banking space, they are in the hands of individuals. And that was the reason why you had the exchange rate volatility, whereby a lot of Naira that were outside the banking space were chasing the dollars outside the banking space to which were with the bureau de change, and you saw that exchange rate volatility. And if you look at that, by and by what the CBN has done, you could say you agree with them, because at the time before this policy came in, the exchange rate was almost hitting 900. And when this policy came in, we saw this exchange rate go as low as 680. Then later on, it has taken a balance at between 700 and 750 since this policy came into circulation. So definitely you could say they score a point with that decision. Now is how much of the new Naira note will you have in circulation by and by the old Naira note? And remember that the old Naira notes, most of them are not with the banks. Even speaking to a bank head just yesterday, it made me to believe that, look, the old Naira note I have is not even up to 1 million. I think it's a 1,000 Naira note. Even after we've asked to pay this money, but the customers are not even ready to collect it. And again, because before you give it to them, you need to explain to them that, look, it's not because I give it to you, tomorrow you bring it. If you are bringing it back, you need to go to the CBN portal. So that is the biggest challenge. So I think what we are saying is, I don't have a word for it. I think somehow, you've given a judgment, you want us to abide with it. Okay, we are going to abide with your judgment.
No, but Muktar, I'm almost confused now, because if the ruling of the central bank is that the old note and the new note should be used, simultaneously, then what's the essence of going back to the guideline of the CBN of returning, the old notes? I mean, is there any need for that? And you have rightly stated that the Supreme Court is supreme, and so its ruling and whatever I say stands as law, and that's what it should be. But however, the people are not, complying to that. People are not spending that money because they're still holding back, and even the banks are not complying, entirely. So you have partial compliance. I still ask again, what could be responsible? You have said technicality, but on the other hand, I'm still saying, you have mentioned also that the reason for all of this is because of the technicality and then the guideline. But if the Supreme Court has ruled, it's very simple: use the note, the old notes and the new note. So what's the essence of the guideline, and what's the essence of the technicality? Is there any technicality in it?
Let's get it straight. The banks were not party to the suit.
Do they need to be party to the suit?
No, wait, I'm trying to get to a point. The banks will not take. The CBN is supposed to send a memo to the bank. Every decision they have taken, they send a memo to the bank and say, look, this is the decision, this is what you have to do. Up to this moment, the CBN has not sent any memo to the bank as regard collecting the old notes or giving customers the old notes via the new note. So what you have said is right. There is subtle, partial disregard for what the Supreme Court have said, because they will tell you, okay, yeah, we have agreed, we are implementing it, but we'll create a guideline. Look, I keep saying this decision from the CBN is more of both political and then security than before we come about economical. Now, the economic sense in this policy have not been allowed to see the light of the day. What we have seen play out is the political side and the security side of it. So that is why we are having the challenge that we are having now. I can tell you that after the gubernatorial election this Saturday, we may begin to see those old notes so much, or even more of the new notes than even the old notes, and people may be able to go into the banking hall to receive it. Now, as it stands now, what we've seen is that the commercial banks are beginning to increase the amount they give to Nigerians. Before you get only 2,000. Now they've increased it to 10,000. So then the ATM machines, they made it 20,000. But still is not enough, because like I always say, our economy is an informal economy that is driven mostly by cash. For me, I don't think the CBN or the federal government has totally respected the Supreme Court judgment.
Well, I know that Kofi is going to come in, but just as we wait to just, coast it down, I'd like to ask, I'm always concerned about the ripple effect, the implication of this for our economy. So it's a good thing that you are an economist and also a financial expert right here. What do you think, the rulings of the Supreme Court, the fact that people are not complying, including the commercial banks and Nigerians complying to the ruling, and then on the other hand, you have a contrary order from the president, and the CBN not necessarily saying anything, is also saying something. All of this, what does this mean for the Nigerian economy? Are there implications on the positive or the negative?
Negative. Because before any foreign investor comes into your economy, what they look out for two things: protection of intellectual property, and the rule of law. In short, rule of law is paramount for any investor to come into your country. So once you begin to see that there is no rule of law, and that means it will give room for corruption, it will give room for mismanagement, it will give room for high-handedness, it will give room to a lot of decisions that will not help your business. So the negativity of it all is that we will not be able to attract the foreign investors that we want to attract into our economy. And the implication of that also we could begin to see the volatility in terms of the exchange rate very soon, because when you don't have those foreign investors to come into our country with their own with their own investment, which will have to be in dollars, which could help shore up our reserve, reduce the pressure on the naira to the dollar, then your guess is as good as mine. So definitely, I don't think it's good. Like I said, two things: institutional investors or investors look at is intellectual property protection and rule of law. And as it stands now, the rule of law, and okay, when you look at intellectual property, it's also we have its protection through the rule of law. So, and once the rule of law is not there, the intellectual property protection is not there again. So definitely, investors will not be confident in coming into your economy. But again, when you look at this administration over the past 8 years, how much of investors are they really attracted into the market? Do they really care about getting foreign investors? They say it's a lip service. To me, they don't add action to it, because when you want to add action to it, these are the opportunity that has been given to you to say, look, the Supreme Court has given judgment. I'm directing the CBN to make sure that they comply with this judgment. If Mr. President can come on national television to give a broadcast on why they should start giving the old notes, the old 200 Naira note, I think it also would be right, morally politically, and a man that they say is a man of integrity, a Democrat, like they made us to believe, should come back to that, give an address, addressing us again and saying, based on the Supreme Court decision, I have directed the CBN to make sure they make available that both the old and the new Naira note. Remember, even after his broadcast that you pointed out, the old 200 Naira note and the current new notes are not even working hand in hand, because immediately the president gave that broadcast, you went to the bank and you start seeing the bank started giving everybody the old 200 Naira notes. They are not even giving the new 200 Naira note again. So definitely there's a lot of politicking going on in this, and like I always say, you don't play politics. Two things you don't play politics with: your economy and your security, because it doesn't look at which party you belong to, or which classes or which class are you. It will definitely have an impact on everybody, whether you're PDP, whether you're APC, whether you're Labour Party, whether you're AGA, whether you're SDP. Once you begin to take decision, economic and security, and you're making the decision based on political reasons, there is always a negative effect.
All right, Nick, thank you. Talking about impact very quickly before we go, I mean, we've seen the impact on the informal sector of the economy. Mercy was talking about how she wants to buy a sachet of water. Is she going to do a transfer to the seller, in traffic? These are the issues, and those who rely on daily income to survive are going through pains as we speak. You earlier talked about the issue of supply, which is very important, because if the volume of supply are acceptable, allowed by the Central Bank of Nigeria, which was not addressed by the Supreme Court, how much they will let into the economy, having mopped up close to 2 trillion naira out of the 3 trillion naira circulation, it won't change anything, So I wanted to talk about the what do you call, very quickly before I go, the withdrawal limits, and the central bank being told by the Supreme Court that such a restriction, quote, such a restriction on an owner's right, because you own the money now, to freely use his or her property is illegal unless provided for by law. Does it mean that we can just go and withdraw whatever we want to withdraw, at any time? That's number one. Number two, very quickly, please, just briefly, what impact has this policy had on the economy so far in terms of the strength of the Naira, in terms of inflation as well, very quickly?
Okay, for the first question, I think it's clear. And before that, we remember that the most learned lawyer, Femi Falana, have said it, that the CBN does not have a right, because the CBN cannot be a judge in their own matter. You're telling me the limit, you are giving the limit of how much I can withdraw of my own money. It's only the court that can give such decisions. So for that, I think they are wrong. The Supreme Court have even come out clearly to say that every Nigerian have a right to collect their money. And as it's the CBN will say they want to impose fine on you for collecting that money. And in that judgment also, when Femi Falana was saying, he said that you do not have a right to impose fine on the people. Fine can only be imposed by a competent court of law. So definitely what it means is that whatever limit the CBN are putting on withdrawal, and they find that they are fining in the customers, is illegal. Now, secondly, what impact does it have on the economy? Definitely a lot of negativity. A lot of people are out of job now. As I'm talking, the guy that is selling in traffic are no more making the kind of return that they used to make before now, because a lot of them do not have a POS terminal. But then Nigerians are very innovative. I'm ending in a lighter note. I went to buy granules from my granite over there, and she stays on traffic. And I said, look, do you have how do I pay you now? I don't have cash. He just said, okay, I have a POS here. And I was so impressed. And he brought our POS and I paid, and we move. So, but definitely not every business can also seamlessly just transform themselves to become cashless. So I think that had a negative impact, and we'll see that in the inflationary figure, because you've said it, demand and supply. When supply is low, then and demand is high, then inflation will definitely come to play. Now, what we are seeing, we are even seeing supply low in terms of currency. We are not even looking at demand of the product. And what we have seen is that most of this good, because of the supply side, which is has to do with even currency, is low, the demand side on these goods has also gone low, and the price of these goods has also gone up, because a lot of Nigerians that do not have access to cash cannot get this good from the rural area. So definitely it's going to have a negative impact on the inflationary figure once it come out. But as I'm ending, remember that the World Bank has even told us that the way we even calculate our inflation in terms of the way we do about going about our inflation is even wrong, because that means that whatever figure they've been giving, they've been using the template of 2003 to 2004 instead of using the new template of 2018, which has to do with household disposable income and household income. So definitely we'll see all this, because household income have definitely reduced, especially in the informal sector. A lot of people no more have money because they can't go out to do businesses again. There's no cash. They don't even know how to buy their goods and services. Where they buy goods, some of the people do not accept cards. They still want cash. So definitely there's a negative impact that is going to do to our economy. And we are already feeling it already, because if you go to the market, you remember, you just know that some things that you used to buy for 100 naira is being sold for 150 naira now.
Muktar, thank you so much for your time. You said overall the impact is negative. We appreciate you, and we'll keep watching this space to see what happens. Muktar Mohammed, financial analyst, has been a guest on this conversation. We appreciate you for your time.
My pleasure always. Thank you. Good morning.
Well, that's the size of it. But Kofi, it wasn't, sachet water. It was a balloon that I wanted to get. But we'll take a break, and when we return, we'll continue with the conversation right here. And the next for us would be looking at the concerns of Mr. President, where he attended the conference of, the less developed countries, 46 of them on the list. And I'm pretty proud that the president had to push some of these concerns for less developed countries. When we return, we'll talk some more. Please stay with us.